The United States Supreme Court has stepped into the fray of the birthright citizenship debate and has now required states to file a brief in opposition to Donald Trump's application to block nationwide injunctions to stop his executive order, completely changing the face of the 14th Amendment and what our meaning of becoming an American, what it means. He's changed that with his executive order, replacing it with his own definition of who gets to be an American when born on American soil. What's the Supreme Court going to do? We break it down on our show that we do exclusively on Legal AF called Unprecedented. Here's an After Dark clip. So let's turn to birthright citizenship. You want to frame how we got here, and then we'll talk about what happens next, like the three cases: Ninth Circuit, Fourth Circuit, First Circuit, because we just had the most recent one. Like the third shoe dropped with the chief judge of the First Circuit sitting in Boston, Massachusetts. That led to this application to block all of the nationwide injunctions, and there are three of them. Why don't you take it from there?
Well, so this is, everyone's been following along with this, right? Because as soon as he issued this executive order, which I think we all now know basically was changing the qualification to become a citizen, that you had to be a child of parents that were here, documented citizens, right? And this is pretty blatantly against how our Constitution is written. So it was automatically enjoined by various circuits, as you just mentioned. And it's finally now coming in front of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has decided to take the case, which will mean that whether or not these injunctions become, let's say, permanent, and this executive order cannot, will essentially be overturned, I guess you can say in that way, or not, will be decided once and for all. It's a little bit, I don't know if it's concerning or not that they take it. The Supreme Court takes cases. If, let's say, one circuit had decided to enjoin it and another circuit hadn't enjoined it, that would be a time when the Supreme Court really should take a case. They take cases where there's differences in opinion with circuits, because then you have literal different interpretations of the law, and they like to reconcile that. In this case, because every circuit decided to enjoin it, they could have done nothing. So with this Supreme Court, anytime they take a case, it's a little bit worrisome. And basically, as you said, there's really two big issues in this case in front of the Supreme Court, according to the Trump administration. One is they want to get rid of birthright citizenship. They point to the fact, we know that the Supreme Court case, back 100 years ago, with the child of Chinese citizens, the Supreme Court determined that he was a U.S. citizen. But it is true, when they were discussing that in their dicta, they point out the fact that the parents were, and let me just quote exactly what that says, had permanent domicile and residence in the United States. This was the case, the Wong Kim arc. And the Trump administration is pointing to that language. At the time of the decision, they were not relying, let's say, their opinion wasn't relying on the fact that the parents were legal residents. They weren't citizens, but they had some legal documents, let's say, right? But the Trump administration is saying, because that was the facts at the time, you should interpret it that is what is legally necessary. The other thing, too, is, as we know, that the Heritage Foundation and all these conservative, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, Thomas, Alito like to talk about what the founders thought, right? As if the founders truly thought about anything that was going to happen at this day and age. I mean, my goodness gracious, if we stuck with what the founders thought, I would have no rights in this country, right? But that's their wanting to do the founders. And so the Trump administration, when they're trying to argue that there should be this legal requirement for the parents, quote, the Senator Trumbull in his speech he gave in 1866. So, for me, that seems, and we think this is kind of laughable that they have to reach that far back in order to justify the change of the law. But with some of these Federalist judges, that might be speaking their tune. So we have that issue. Will they kind of modify it, let's say. I don't think they're going to go as far as Trump wants, but I could see them possibly modifying it a little bit. And then the injunction issue. As we've talked about before, both administrations actually have wanted the Supreme Court to limit universal injunctions. The Biden administration wanted them to do that because a single judge was preventing them from enforcing their anti-money laundering. And when Biden was in office, us Democrats were really frustrated that Texas judge kept on making these injunctions that was affecting the whole country. It does allow for forum shopping. But in this situation, where we want judges to protect us from Trump, we are hoping that they keep it. But I because of that inherent, let's say, both sides like it sometimes, very non-legal way to describe the conflict here. In January, the Supreme Court didn't want to take up the issue of whether or not injunctions were good or not. Gorsuch was the only one who said he wanted to do it. I don't think they're going to have a consensus this time around either, because it is, to undo it is going to have such big ramifications on both sides of the aisle. I don't think that they're going to come to an agreement on that. What do you think, Popok?
Well, I'll start with that, and I'll go back to birthright citizenship. Yeah, I think the nationwide or global injunctions or universal injunctions are just a function of the nature of the injury that's being proposed. I know the Heritage Foundation was like, well, if it's not a class action, they should only be dealing with the parties that are in front of them. So the 22 states or the 18 states. But what are you going to do? You're going to say in 22 states, you're going to have birthright citizenship, but in 18 states or 28 states, you don't? Mm-hmm. I mean, there's just certain things that the reality of having to give proper remedy and relief to the parties is akin to a class action. Lord knows MAGA and Heritage and Federalists loved universal injunctions during the Biden administration when they used them to their advantage to block reproductive rights for women, medicated abortions, Biden's immigration policies, Biden's COVID policies, you name it. And then, they did the Texas two-step or the Louisiana two-step. They go run into a Texas judge. They, one judge in the district. They get that one judge. And then that one judge issues a nationwide injunction. We just saw Judge Kaczmarek issue a nationwide injunction on mifepristone to stop medicated abortions, which is the 50% way that women, half abortions in America are by prescription that way. And nobody had a complaint about that. They were all celebrating in the streets. Nationwide injunctions are great. But when you're out of office or you're on the other side of them, you don't like them much.
Yeah, exactly.
Alito, Thomas, and Gorsuch hate them. Mm-hmm. There's always 3 votes to get rid of nationwide injunctions. Gorsuch has gone on a rant in various cases and in interviews where he has said things like, it is the bane of the existence. It violates Article 3 jurisdiction. It's both hasty, creates too fast, too quick, under record decision making, and I hate it. And sometimes he gets Alito to join, he gets Thomas to join. The question is Kavanaugh, Roberts, and Amy Coney Barrett. Why does this matter? It matters because when you have an out of control president, you need to have a judge have the power, jurisdiction, and balls to issue a nationwide injunction. Otherwise, we got to go to all 50 states,
exactly,
to file cases, which is ridiculous. We're already seeing there's already 3 overlapping nationwide injunctions involving birthright citizenship. 1 out of Washington, affirmed by the Ninth Circuit. 2 out of Massachusetts or that area, affirmed by the First Circuit. And 1 out of Maryland, affirmed by the Fourth Circuit. Some people might ask, well, why do we need so many? You only need 1. Well, no, you see the argument on the other side about it. So these groups are slightly different in who they represent. Sometimes it's federal workers. Sometimes it's the actual, in this case, the pregnant people. Sometimes it's the public interest groups or whatever. And then they're trying to do, working sort of together, is come up with the best case, best record to have the right case up before the United States Supreme Court, which is where all these are heading. And so right now we've got 3 universal injunctions all against Trump administration on birthright citizenship on the exact same analysis, effectively. And now the Supreme Court's going to have to deal with it, not competing ones. I mean, procedurally, it happened to what I said was going to happen on an earlier hot take today, which is Barrett, Kagan for California, Roberts for the 4th, and Ketanji Brown Jackson for the 1st, all referred it over to the full Supreme Court, and they didn't do their shadow docket, emergency docket method where we'd get 3 different. They wanted to avoid 3 different Supreme Court justices ruling differently, and so they referred it over. What we got just now before we went on the air is what I thought would happen is although I said it would be a quicker briefing schedule, and the fact that the court has ordered the 22 states and the other parties to file their opposition to the Trump application for this emergency block of the injunction. They've given them until April 4th, which is, it's like 3 weeks away. Mm-hmm. And they're going to let babies be born and be U.S. citizens in the meantime.
Yeah.
For me, the length, I could be wrong. I want to hear your opinion. The length of time indicates to me they don't see this as an urgent thing. Mm-hmm. And they're going to let the 3 groups take 3 weeks to put their briefing schedule together and let babies born in the meantime be U.S. citizens. What do you think about that?
I think you're right. And I don't think that they're going to give the administration everything they want. I could see there being something maybe related to they talk like somebody temporarily in the United States being born. I could see them modifying it a little bit. But you're right. It shouldn't be urgent. It's the way we have functioned since the inception of our country, or at least since the inception of this amendment, the constitutional amendment that allowed the 14th Amendment. And back to the universal injunctions, I think another reason too why getting rid of it is kind of impractical in a way is because let's say you're in Florida, I'm in California, and your state has sued.
We can say that.
Because it's true. Your state has sued successfully that a child born to you, even if you are undocumented, is a citizen, but not for me, right? I think I have a really good due process claim in that respect, saying that the law is being applied unequally here because that same constitutional 14th Amendment is being applied differently to you and me. And so to me, if you get rid of universal injunctions, I think you end up getting a whole bunch of successful due process violations with it. And so although I get it, I get the sentiment of why should that one judge necessarily make it especially when it's like a judge like the Texas judge. At the end of the day, the federal law is the federal law. And it shouldn't be applied differently regardless of the state you're in. And we have a mechanism. If different judges around the country interpret it differently, that's why we have a Supreme Court to resolve those differences. So I think it works as it does, even if people don't maybe like always the outcome.
Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett they've sided against universal injunctions on occasion, but they don't have a universal belief that they are wrong in every case. And that's what the reason, let's just call it out. Let's just pull the mask off. The reason that MAGA wants, in this case or in other cases, to get rid of universal injunctions is because it's a powerful weapon of the judiciary to fight against an out of control, megalomaniacal dictator in the making. Mm-hmm. So I've seen the Heritage Foundation articles from the first Trump administration where they say, unitary president meet unitary judiciary. They don't like the unitary judiciary. They want to divide and conquer. They want 50 states. They want 12 federal circuits. They don't, right? They want to play whack-a-mole. They don't want because, for instance, you hear how Carolyn Leavitt, the world's youngest press secretary, how she talks about, isn't that her title? That's what every time they mention Carolyn Leavitt, they always have to brag about how young she is. And all I see is how young she is. And she gets fed these quotes. And I saw a quote today that she put out about another national injunction. We have a series of judges who are, against the unitary power of the president. See the language, the vocabulary. Yeah. And if they want to exercise executive power, they should just run for president. But we're not going to allow a federal judge. Well, you were fine when the federal judge was Kaczmarek and he was blocking a woman's right to choose.
Absolutely.
You're okay with the judges in Louisiana blocking COVID policy or acting like they were the commander in chief instead of Joe Biden. You're okay then. You just don't like it when you're on the other side of it. So I think they're not going to stick their noses into that particular thing. And I don't think we'll see what happens on April 4th and a few days later when the Supreme Court finally rules. I just don't see them taking the bait from the Trump administration, who wrote in their brief, in their application, get this, everybody sit down for this one, that every administration for the last over 100 years has gotten the interpretation of the 14th Amendment wrong, including apparently Trump 45. Because he was president once before. Everyone has gotten it wrong. They misread the language about subject to the jurisdiction of the country. See, if you're here temporarily, but by permission, or you're here illegally, you're not really subject to the jurisdiction of this country. How is that? How is that? And by the way, we're talking about the baby. So when the baby gets out, I don't know if people understand how babies work. maybe because we just had one recently in my family. Yeah. I kind of get it. They don't get out and go, Viva Colombia! They go goo goo gaga, and they're born on soil. That's why we don't deal with having an interview of a baby about what allegiance they have to what foreign power or what jurisdiction. They're just born. Where were you born? Good enough for us. You're a citizen. That's the way it works in this country. And if you don't like it, and obviously MAGA doesn't like it, and they conflate it with the border problem. What's the border problem in Massachusetts? The border between New Hampshire and Massachusetts? The president needs to be able to control the border. We have to be, I don't know, birth tourism. If you don't like birth tourism and anchor babies, then there's one method for that. Go propose a constitutional amendment, get 2/3 of Congress to approve it, and then get 2/3 of the states to approve it. Good luck.
Yeah, exactly. But why do you think they took the case then? Because it would have been very easy to, if they're not planning on looking at the injunction, if they're not planning on modifying the 14th Amendment with birthright citizenship,
I think they got to kill
circuits are in
They got to kill it. I think there's two reasons. One, they got 4 votes.
Yeah. And
we know who the 4 votes are. We know that Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, Alito, and Thomas thought it was interesting. So you need 4 to take it. They haven't taken it yet. There's a phrase they use in the Supreme Court. They actually use it on the Supreme Court justice about whether something is cert worthy. Ultimately, whether they're going to take the appeal is for another day. This is only about whether they're going to block the injunction or not during the pendency of the merits appeal. And they haven't even decided that yet. It's really just an administrative. It's nothing. They haven't even administratively stated. So they've sided so far with the judges. They haven't administratively stated, which is good. They've said, you know what? It's sort of interesting. Get back to us on April 4th. Let's see your brief. They did the same thing, except with a stay. Remember when we reported on Roberts about U.S. aid? Yeah. $2 billion. We were like, he just did an administrative stay until Friday. Then Friday came, because he did a very fast briefing schedule on that. And Friday came, and he took a look at the U.S. aid's brief, and he was like, Yep, I'm not going to block that injunction, that mandatory injunction, pay the $2 billion. Judge Ali, you take over from here. So we were a little bit, we got a little agita when we saw the administrative stay. No administrative stay here. A briefing schedule way out, not even a schedule. Well, we'll see your brief on April 4th. So I don't think they've taken it. So I'm not concerned yet about it. I think they will take it, though. I think they will take it to kill the Trump argument once and for all.
But if they basically undo the injunction, they're saying that Trump administration has a likelihood of success on the merits,
if they do.
which would mean they kind of are saying that he could change citizenship. So I get what you're saying, that it's administrative, but it still worries me enough. But to your point, and I'm going to hold on to this thought.
There's no stay. There's no stay.
Right. There's no stay. But I'm saying, well, right now, practically, the lower courts have an injunction in place. And the question is, do they undo that or not, the Supreme Court?
Yeah, they're not. So my thought process is, I am encouraged by the fact that there's no stay. Mm-hmm. Not even an administrative one, until we get to April 4th. All they're waiting for is the brief on April 4th. And I think at the end of that brief on April 4th, I think they do not block the injunction. And I think they will let the appeals run their course, and they'll decide for next term whether they're going to take the birthright citizenship 14th Amendment, or you're right, or we're both right. And they go, it is so clear on the nose of the face of the Constitution that we're not going to let an executive order, which we think is the lowest way to legislate or rule by fiat, overcome. We don't agree with the language about jurisdiction, subject to the jurisdiction, and Trump's interpretation of it, changing 100 years of precedent and every presidential position, including his own, over the last 100 years.
I think our only saving grace is only 4 needed to take the case. I'm holding on to hope with that.
Yeah.
Because if it's just them, then, we're okay. So.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to continue. It'll be fun. April 4th, tune back in. I don't think there'll be an oral argument. I think they'll just be on the papers, and we will cover it. And we're going to continue to cover something to put on our radar screens for our audience is this unitary president model and how much disdain it has for nationwide injunctions, because it empowers federal judges, and they don't want powerful federal judges. That's why we see Donald Trump and his administration bashing law firms.
Yeah.
That's why we see them bashing judges. That's why we see them disrespecting judges again, just as he did as the criminal defendant. And we see, and judges are starting to get pissed off and fire back. I'm going to get Judge Ludick back. Because he's starting to stand up for the federal judiciary again, as only he can.
We love Amy Coney Barrett as our swing vote in most things, but in this area, she's not going to help us. It is a really disturbing time, which sometimes makes us feel powerless, but this is why we do midterms. This is why we get involved in local elections. The Supreme Court is not going to save us from the religious right tsunami that is coming to try to change how we live our lives, even though it is none of their business.
And to be clear, I don't love, and you don't either, Amy Coney Barrett, because she's wrong on so many issues. But I have to recognize, I have eyes. I have to recognize that she's become the swing vote, and we need her on certain things that matter about presidential power. She's completely untrustworthy in terms of reproductive rights or church and state issues, or even criminal president issues. Wrong, and more wrong. And it's the sad state of affairs when you and I and our audience have to count on Amy Coney Barrett to bring home the bacon, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Some of these issues. Let's stay with her for a minute.
Yeah.
So Amy Coney Barrett, she didn't roll her eyes, but most people thought she did at the joint session. And she took a lot of flack from
I
MAGA.
saw that interaction.
Yeah, she took a lot of the meme is out there. The mean meme is out there. And the reality is, you and I have been tracking we were one of the first shows to really talk about it so early, because it was imperceptible in the beginning, the move. You had it was like one of these slow motion camera things where to catch a fly being eaten by a bullfrog. You have to takes a while. And it took us a while.
The opposite of what Kavanaugh has done, actually.
Yes.
Because his first year, he voted in the majority every single time. And now, he's nowhere to be found. Yeah.
Gorsuch has gone hard right when we had some hopes that he would be the swing vote. But she, we had to see it. We had to find it. It was like in dissents or snarky little comments back to Alito or Thomas, or out and out voting on the other side on issues. She started as kind of softly. It's like, well, I'll join you, but here's my concurrence, and I don't really agree with your thought process or your jurisprudential analysis. And then it went full blown, no, you're wrong, and I'm voting with the 3 ladies over here. Right. So that got it, but it depends on the issue. If you're talking, she's a University of Notre Dame, she's a practicing Catholic, she's got 8 kids, a lot of them adopted. She's the one that said during a discussion about abortion and the Dobbs decision, She's the one that said, well, why can't they just have them and then drop them off at firehouses? I'm like, sorry?
Right.
That may make for a Hallmark movie, but I don't really, right?
I mean, it's because she adopted, and I understand. Like, I think the problem with Republicans in general is that they cannot put themselves in the shoes of somebody else, because like for her, adoption works. So she sees it as a solution to everyone.
That's right.
But you don't know what somebody's solution is going to be. And if you're unwilling to kind of accept that reality, you're always going to see the world as doing what you would have done. And I think that's actually the biggest difference between Democrats and Republicans. We're willing to put the shoes in somebody else, like put ourselves in somebody else's experience, even if we haven't had that lived experience.
Well, look, we're going to continue to watch Amy Coney Barrett. We got 2 big cases coming up that we're going to see. And the lack of continuity of thought issue is going to come up again, because she may be in the right spot for you and me and our audience for birthright citizenship. Welcome back. Thanks for being on Legal AF. That was Dina Doll and me, Michael Popok. We're here every day, every hour, every week on the Legal AF YouTube channel. Take a minute. We just rolled the odometer to 500,000 subscribers, but we're not done on our march to 1 million before the year is over. We'll do it with your help and hopefully with content that you like and enjoy like that. We do Unprecedented every week here on Legal AF. Check out the other hot takes and legal contributors that we have exclusively for you on Legal AF. In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories, the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.